It's sort of, Germans, I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings here. I think Germans always go for a head-on collision, and it rarely has sort of grace and melody and rhythm. It's just the...
Today we retrospect the German corona chaos. Over 100,000 people dead. And for their sake, let's get this right. Let's first disclose our mindset. So we are supporting publicly available data, scientific objectivity, and philosophy. We are assuming that the data will be incomplete as not all cases are reported. We are assuming that the variants make things worse and not better. And we are assuming no ill will from the involved parties. Disclaimers: we are not against vaccinations on this channel, as they can be quite effective in right places. We are not giving any medical advice, so please follow advice from official authorities. We are going to look at 4 major themes. Let's start from the facts about case growth. Let's look at the total cases in Germany. This is where the first lockdown, a 7-week long, was. This is when the vaccination began, and this is when the boostering began. Now, this part of the graph looks like linear growth to me. That means regardless what the Germans have tried, it has not worked to stop the virus from spreading. Today we have 68% of the population fully vaccinated, 6 million total cases, out of which 5.9 million have recovered. But since not all cases are recorded, the real growth of cases might look something like this. Unless Germans find a way to break the linear trend, we might have in 1 year 12 million recovered, year after that 18 million, year after that 20 million, etc., etc. Most Germans will be recovered. All of us will get it eventually. Next up, breakthrough infections. Here is a German news reporter talking about a Swedish study that shows the decline rates for different vaccination types. Looks like you are very well off with Moderna and less well off with AstraZeneca. This graph shows percentage of breakthrough infections in Germany plotted over weeks. Basically, it means that at week 46, 71% of infected seniors were fully vaccinated and 49% of infected adults were fully vaccinated, i.e. breakthrough infections. This is the point when the politicians said this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. A number of virologists stepped up and said, no we don't, we just have a pandemic. A few weeks later, politicians started demanding mandatory vaccinations. Now this is a bit weird because we can clearly see from this graph that the percentage of breakthroughs amongst seniors was already over 50% and the percentage amongst adults was approaching 50%. The data I'm using comes from the highest official agency, the Robert Koch Institute. They deliver an excellent weekly reporting, each report being over 30 pages long, jam-packed with data. I'd give a very good note on this work, so thank you RKA. 2 quick comments, however. Breakthrough data is averaged over 4 weeks, so basically RKA knows more than it discloses. I assume actually that they give more accurate reports to the political leadership. At least I would ask for that if I was a political leader, which I never want to be, by the way. RKI does not track breakthrough infections through natural immunity, meaning we don't know how many recovered people get reinfected. My running assumption is that the amount of infections amongst the recovered is minimal. Since you deserve to know, here are the graphs for breakthrough hospitalizations, intensive care, and deaths. Since I don't want to rub this data into anyone's face or cause unnecessary panic, let's just move on. Stop the video if you want to look at this more carefully. And next up, the rules. The German hygiene model has been very strict from early 2020 onwards. We have had face masks, first the medical ones, then FFP2s, lots of distancing stuff, hand washing, etc. It's all been there. And again, the masks have been the proper ones. The strategy has been quite complicated. To get a feel how complicated the rules can be, let's just have the current rules of a random city scroll up.
I'm putting you in command of the spaceship.
Fuck it, let's move on. Here is an example of how the Bavarian state strategy has changed. First, they based things on traffic lights and a 7-day incident value, which is a pretty good metaphor. But since the incident value grew out of their scale, they finally decided to sack the traffic light system and base things on a number of hospitalizations. Now the new slogan is block, break and boost. Access control generally is based on different kind of G rules. Basically, the less G's and more pluses you have, the more restrictive the rules are. At the moment, 2G is in place pretty much overall Germany, and this is bad news for the unvaccinated and those who have been recovered over 6 months ago. Let me focus your attention to 1G, as this is the most restrictive control before a full lockdown. 1G means get tested, or that only tested people can enter specific spaces. However, today some politicians are already rebranding this as geimpft or vaccinated, meaning that anyone but the vaccinated are in a silent lockdown. Next up is what I call the German caste system. What now follows might sound shocking, but this is an accurate description of the situation. So there exists a hierarchy now in Germany with 3 active players. On top are the vaccinated. Until recently they have suffered no freedom restrictions and they are portrayed in the media as the people who do the right thing. So they are morally upstanding. Below them we find people whose recovery is under 6 months old. Although these people enjoy almost the same freedoms as the vaccinated, they have a little bit of dirty stigma around them, I would say. And at the lowest level, we find the unvaccinated. They are openly blamed and stigmatized for being morally or intellectually unsound. And they are punished by taking away their basic rights. They are now in a de facto lockdown. In addition to these 3 groups, there is one more group. It's a forgotten group that doesn't even have a name. I call them Ü6M genesen, or over 6 months recovered. These guys recovered but didn't take a vaccine because they have natural immunity. They are unfairly likened to the unvaccinated and currently stand in a lockdown. There are quite a few scientific studies that suggest that natural immunity amongst the recovered, including the Ü6M genesen group, is broad and long-lasting. Here are just 4 samples from 100 or so. Please pause and read for yourself. So, instead of this kind of immunological hierarchy, the true hierarchy might actually look like this. Of course, we should always distinguish between health risks towards individuals and containment of the virus spread as a national risk. Quite a few comorbidities exists, or things that may lead to a difficult form of COVID. Things like cancer, obesity, smoking, and Down syndrome. Now, hypothetically, if we found out that these groups were overfilling the emergency units, do you think we would have politicians blaming them? Of course not. This just shows how easy targets the unvaccinated are. And for those who think I was comparing apples and oranges, here is again the graphs about breakthrough infections. Pandemic of the unvaccinated we do not have. It's a fact that German government is discriminating certain portion of the population. Now, I am not making a Nazi comparison, but I am saying that the mechanism of control is identical. A control through small bureaucrats with red rubber stamps.
You know who gave Hitler his power? The clerks and the bookkeepers, the civil servants. I had this one weakness. I believe in a just God. I always seem to err on the side of democracy.
If you think I'm the only one concerned, please think again, highlighting just two here. Now, Dr. Kampf is a German doctor who wrote an opinion piece to The Lancet with a telling title, "Stigmatizing the Unvaccinated is Not Justified." Then we have psychiatrist Dr. Bonelli, who talks about how the stigmatization works from a psychological perspective. He also talks about the over 6 months recovered as a forgotten group and as a bullied group. If you understand German, check out his YouTube channel. It's quite good. Next up, exit ramp. Politicians in Germany and Austria portray an archaic leadership style. They talk down to the people as if they were children. Their message is overly focused on vaccinations being the only way out, the only way forward. Honestly, guys, you can't keep making stuff up. You really need to give some arguments and show some data. The data I have seen and now shown to you suggests that vaccines have not helped Germany in stopping the virus, and that COVID infections are penetrating fully vaccinated as well. Now, I can think at least 4 reasons for the political behavior. The first is sunk cost fallacy, where a person keeps on a chosen path because deviating from it might cause feelings of shame and disappointment. It can be also black and white thinking, a fallacy where a person falsely offers only 2 possible alternatives, even though a broad range of possibles are available. Plain old ignorance is one option, where a person doesn't know that they don't know. Lastly, politics. If these guys know the facts but are still working from a political agenda in a self-preservation mode, then that would be just short of evil. Time will tell what it was, but if I had to guess, I would say the politicians are in a sunk cost fallacy mode, unable to deviate from a chosen path. I believe that when the old-fashioned vaccines come out in 2022, then many of the unvaccinated will get it, and those who don't are making a free choice in taking the additional risk. Now here is a radical idea. Why not manage the overall risk by offering something on top or on the side of vaccinations, something that optimizes people's immune systems? The good people at universities of Tübingen and Heidelberg just published a study where they found, and I kid you not, that vitamin D decreases COVID mortality. They even calculated the theoretical threshold for zero mortality. What? Why aren't the politicians talking about this and planning further studies? If we acted on this now with a field experiment, we could have solid case within 3 months. Stop the video if you want to read the conclusion. And if you want to know more about vitamin D generally, which is actually not a vitamin but a hormone, I know 2 places where you can get very good information for the layman. So Dr. John Campbell, a YouTube star, did 2 videos about the study I just presented, and he explains this study and its significance much better than I could ever do. Then we have the good old Steve Gibson, a recognized security expert whose fan I've been for the last 15 years. Already back in 2009, Steve did an excellent introduction to vitamin D in a podcast. He is not a doctor, but just scary smart, and he knows what he's talking about. So kudos to John and Steve for informing people about vitamin D. Thousands have died and millions more left forgotten, stigmatized, unwanted. It's time to start talking about the basic human rights of the recovered. Why? Because that, my friends, will be everybody's fate.